Without geometry, our world would be a formless and unstable place. This ancient science gave us the pyramids, the Parthenon, and the very foundations of our modern cities. We are about to uncover how civilizations long gone used geometric principles to build their empires and encode a sense of cosmic order into the fabric of their daily lives. By the end of this journey, you will see the hidden patterns that have guided human progress for thousands of years. How did ancient builders achieve such impossible precision with only simple tools? Why did they believe mathematical shapes held divine secrets? What does our own world of straight lines and perfect circles owe to their forgotten genius? What invisible structures shape the reality you take for granted? That primal urge to measure and mark our world is written in stone. Long before the first cities rose, our ancestors were already speaking the language of shape and space. Think of a hunter tracking prey across vast distances, their mind creating an invisible map of landmarks and paths. Or consider the earliest farmers dividing fertile land into plots with simple boundary stones. These were not acts of abstract thought, but of survival. They required an intuitive understanding of distance, area, and direction. This was geometry in its most fundamental form, a practical tool born from the human need to navigate and organize a seemingly chaotic world. Archaeologists have found evidence of this innate drive everywhere. Look at the stunning symmetry of pottery from thousands of years ago, each curve and line perfectly proportioned by hands that had no formal training. Or gaze upon the great stone circles like Stonehenge, where massive rocks were arranged with astounding precision to align with the sun and stars. These monuments were not just calendars, they were cosmic declarations. They linked the human world to the heavens, using geometry as a bridge between the earthly and the divine. Historians like James Burke point out that this was a universal language. From the Americas to Asia, disparate cultures arrived at the same geometric principles independently. They used circles, lines, and angles to create order, to perform rituals, and to mark the passage of seasons. Why did a basic spiral or a series of triangles hold such power across the globe? It seems that the human brain is wired to seek out patterns, to find harmony in repetition and proportion. This deep-seated curiosity, this need to impose order on nature, was the essential spark. It transformed simple observation into a powerful tool that would eventually allow humanity to build not just monuments, but entire civilizations. That same cosmic order found its purest expression in the patterns they considered sacred. A single, perfect circle represented the unity of all creation. When a second circle of equal size overlaps its center, the shape formed in the middle, an almond-like figure, was known as the vesica piscis. To the ancients, this was not just a shape. It was a symbol of the moment of creation, the intersection of the divine and the material world. You can see this form echoed in the pointed arches of Gothic cathedrals and the aureolas surrounding holy figures in classical art. It was the first day of Genesis, a geometric seed from which all other patterns could grow. From this simple beginning, they constructed increasingly complex diagrams, like the flower of life, a network of interlocking circles that resembles a honeycomb. This pattern was etched into stone temples in Egypt and carved into ancient Chinese temples, a universal symbol of the interconnectedness of all life. Philosophers like Plato took this idea even further. He proposed that the entire universe was constructed from 5 perfect 3-dimensional shapes, the Platonic solids. He associated each one with a fundamental element, the cube with earth, the icosahedron with water, the tetrahedron with fire, the octahedron with air, and the dodecahedron with the cosmos itself. To build with these forms was to literally build with the essence of reality. This was not abstract philosophy, it was a practical blueprint for builders. When you walk into a grand cathedral or a Hindu temple, you are not just entering a building. You are walking into a model of the universe designed according to these divine ratios. The entire layout of a Hindu temple, for instance, is a precise geometric diagram called a Vastu Purusha mandala. It is a cosmic map with the central shrine representing the axis of the world and the surrounding pathways guiding the worshipper on a symbolic journey from the outer world of illusion to the inner world of enlightenment. Every step, every turn, is a geometric calculation intended to elevate the human spirit. Why did cultures separated by continents and oceans all arrive at this same profound conclusion, that mathematical perfection was a window to the divine? It speaks to a deep, shared human intuition that the chaos of the world rests upon a foundation of perfect, eternal forms. This spiritual conviction did not just shape individual buildings, it would soon be used to design entire cities, laying out streets and districts as a grand reflection of the cosmic order. That vision of a divinely ordered world did not remain confined to temples. It was etched directly into the earth to shape the very first cities. Walk through the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, and you are navigating a marvel of geometric planning from over 4,000 years ago. Its streets run in perfect perpendicular lines, creating a rigid grid of residential blocks, public baths, and granaries. This was not an accidental arrangement. It was a conscious application of geometry to solve the fundamental problems of urban life. The city featured the world's first known sophisticated drainage system, with channels and slopes carefully calculated to carry waste away from homes, promoting public health on an unprecedented scale. Every lane and building plot was measured and aligned, creating a template for efficiency and social order that feels strangely modern. This geometric obsession was a global phenomenon. Ancient Chinese capitals like Chang'an were laid out as perfect squares, oriented to the cardinal directions with palaces and markets placed according to sacred principles. In Greece, the orthogonal grid plan, known as the Hippodamian system, divided cities into specialized zones for public, private, and religious use, facilitating trade, defense, and civic life. Historian Spiro Kostov argued that these plans were far more than practical blueprints. They were powerful statements of a society's vision for itself. Straight, wide streets enforced a sense of hierarchy and control, while symmetrical layouts made a city legible and accessible to its inhabitants and rulers alike. Look at Mesopotamian settlements, where the entire city radiated out from a central temple or ziggurat, its main avenues like spokes on a wheel focusing all energy and attention toward the spiritual and political heart. This radial pattern made a powerful statement about the central authority governing every aspect of life, but perhaps no civilization weaponized geometry for administration like the Romans. Their vast empire was stitched together by arrow-straight roads that cut across mountains and valleys. These were not meandering paths, they were geometric lines of conquest and control, enabling legions to march swiftly and messengers to relay information across thousands of miles. The layout of a Roman military camp was a perfect grid, replicated identically across Europe and North Africa, a geometric formula for instant urbanization and imperial rule. So how did living within these geometric cages shape daily existence? For the average citizen, it meant predictability and security. You knew where to find the market, the public forum, and the city gates. It standardized life, making complex societies manageable. geometry became the invisible hand that organized thousands of people into a cohesive, functioning whole. It was the ultimate tool for civilization building, setting a structural precedent that our modern metropolises still follow. This same organizing principle, when applied to single structures, would lead to some of the most breathtaking monuments ever constructed by human hands. The pyramids of Giza do not simply sit upon the desert, they are fused with it, their immense weight distributed by a perfect geometric form. Each triangular face channels colossal forces downward and outward with such efficiency that they have weathered millennia. This was not brute force construction, it was applied mathematics on a grand scale. To align the Great Pyramid's base with the cardinal directions, the builders achieved an accuracy of less than 1/15 of a degree. They likely used a simple yet brilliant method of circumpolar star observations, creating a circle on the ground and marking the points where a particular star set and rose. Bisecting that angle gave them a true north-south line, a stunning feat of celestial triangulation performed with nothing more than stakes and string. This precision was not just for show, it was fundamental to the structure's symbolic resonance, connecting the pharaoh's tomb to the eternal cycles of the heavens. Across the Mediterranean, Greek architects were mastering a different kind of precision, one that played with human perception itself. Look at the Parthenon, a building that seems composed of straight lines and right angles. In reality, there is almost no true straightness in its entire design. Its base curves upward slightly in the middle, its columns lean inward, and they all have a gentle swell in the center. This subtle curvature, called intosses, was a geometric correction for an optical illusion. The architects knew that perfectly straight lines would appear to sag to the human eye, so they built the sag into the structure so that it would be perceived as straight and majestic. This was geometry serving not just stability but psychology. The Roman architect Vitruvius later codified this principle, arguing that beautiful buildings must mirror the proportions of the human body. He championed the use of ratios like the golden mean, a proportion where the whole is to the larger part as the larger part is to the smaller. This ratio appears in the floor plans of Greek temples and the facades of Roman buildings, creating a sense of harmony that feels instinctively right because it is reflected in our own bodily proportions. This marriage of form and function reached its zenith under the Roman dome. The Pantheon in Rome remains the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome, a perfect hemisphere of breathtaking scale. Its geometry is a masterpiece of engineering and symbolism. The oculus at its apex, a single circular opening, allows a beam of light to sweep across the interior like a cosmic clock, illuminating the richly decorated niches in a daily cycle. The dome's internal surface is coffered with indented squares that reduce its weight without sacrificing strength, another geometric optimization. The entire structure is a model of the cosmos, the hemispherical vault representing the heavens and the oculus the sun. Even sound was subject to geometric control. The concentric circular seating of Greek and Roman amphitheaters was not merely for good sightlines. The curved stone surfaces acted as acoustic mirrors, reflecting and channeling sound waves so effectively that a whisper on the stage could be heard in the highest tiers. Each of these structures, from pyramid to temple to dome, teaches the same profound lesson. Geometry was the silent partner to the architect's vision, the hidden framework that turned ambitious dreams into enduring stone. But this mastery of earthly form was only one half of the story. To fully understand the ancient mind, we must see how they used these same principles to build a bridge to the stars themselves. The stones of Karnak did not simply face the sunrise. They were engineered to capture a single, specific beam of light on the dawn of the summer solstice. This was not guesswork, it was celestial mechanics carved in stone. Across the globe, ancient cultures transformed their landscapes into vast observatories, using geometry as their universal language to read the sky. The Mayans tracked the complex cycles of Venus with such precision that their calendar predicted its appearances centuries into the future. They built pyramidal temples with stairways and doorways aligned to its extreme rising and setting points on the horizon. To achieve this, they practiced a form of spherical geometry, mapping the dome of the sky onto the flat plane of the Earth. Scholar Anthony Aveney explains that this required an advanced understanding of angles and sightlines, turning entire buildings into permanent astronomical instruments. In the high deserts of Peru, the Nazca people took this concept to its grandest scale. They etched enormous geometric shapes and animal figures into the desert floor, lines so vast their full form is only visible from the air. Many of these long, straight pathways point directly toward the place on the horizon where the sun rises during the solstices, or where certain star clusters first appear. They were not meant for human eyes to see from the ground, but perhaps as offerings for the gods in the sky, or as colossal ritual pathways aligned with cosmic forces. This intimate connection between geometry and the heavens was a practical necessity. For nomadic tribes like the builders of the Big Horn Medicine Wheel in North America, survival depended on knowing when to move with the seasons. The wheel's 28 spokes, arranged in a perfect circle of stones, point unerringly toward the summer solstice sunrise and the rising points of key stars like Sirius and Aldebaran. It was a calendar made of rock, a permanent fixture in a migratory world that synchronized their hunting and gathering with the reliable clockwork of the cosmos. Why pour such immense effort into aligning stones with stars? It was more than agricultural planning. By mapping the heavens onto the earth, these societies were weaving their lives into the fabric of the universe. Their rituals, their harvests, their very sense of time became a reflection of celestial order. This profound belief gave them a place and a purpose within the grand design, turning the terrifying vastness of space into a familiar and patterned home. Achieving such perfect alignments, however, demanded tools of equal precision, moving from grand cosmic visions to the practical genius in an artisan's hands. The Egyptian harpadonapti, the rope stretchers, carried their most vital tool coiled over a shoulder. It was a length of rope divided into 12 equal segments by 13 knots. To lay out a perfect right angle for a pyramid's foundation, they did not need a complex instrument. They would peg one knot into the ground, stretch the rope taut to the fourth knot, then to the eighth, and finally back to the first. The triangle formed was a perfect 3-4-5 right triangle, a geometric truth they understood and applied with breathtaking simplicity. This was the essence of ancient engineering, turning abstract principles into physical action with tools that were elegant in their directness. For ensuring vertical lines, the plumb bob was universal. It was nothing more than a weighted cord, yet it was the standard of truth for walls and columns from Babylon to Rome. The force of gravity pulling the weight straight down gave builders an unchanging reference for perpendicularity. For horizontality, they turned to water. A water level, a simple trough of liquid, provides a perfectly level surface regardless of the terrain's unevenness. The Romans perfected this concept with the chorobates, a long wooden bench with a central groove filled with water. Surveyors could sight along its top or use the water's surface itself to ensure their aqueducts maintained a precise, gentle gradient for miles. Without this consistent slope, the water would either stagnate or flow with destructive force. This tool combined geometry and hydraulics in a single, brilliant device. For more complex angles and long-distance alignments, Greek and Roman engineers used the dioptra. Described by Hero of Alexandria, it was essentially a precise sight mounted on a rotating platform, an early theodolite. With it, a single surveyor could trace a straight line across a valley or ensure that a tunnel dug from both sides of a mountain would meet perfectly in the middle. The astrolabe, a later marvel of metalwork, mapped the three-dimensional sky onto a two-dimensional disk, allowing astronomers and navigators to measure the altitude of stars and calculate time or latitude. Each of these tools, from the humble knotted rope to the intricate astrolabe, was a physical manifestation of a geometric law. They did not create the principles of right angles or level planes. They simply revealed them, making the invisible forces of mathematics visible and actionable. How did these instruments evolve? They grew in sophistication alongside the ambitions of the empires that wielded them. The simple rope was sufficient for a single temple, but the chorobates was necessary for an aqueduct that stretched to the horizon, and the dioptra for a road that crossed an entire continent. This practical mastery of measurement, however, was only one side of the coin. For these techniques to be preserved and transmitted, they needed to be codified into a system of thought, a formal language of lines and proofs that could outlast any single empire. Euclid's work in Alexandria transformed scattered practical knowledge into an unshakable fortress of logic. His book, The Elements, did not introduce new shapes or tools to the world. Instead, it gave humanity a new way of thinking. He began with a handful of self-evident truths, simple statements everyone could agree upon, such as the fact that a straight line can be drawn between any 2 points. From these few axioms, he built a towering edifice of proofs, each new theorem resting firmly on the one before it. This was the birth of deductive reasoning, a template for certainty that would shape scientific thought for 2,000 years. Mathematician Carl Boyer emphasized that this was Euclid's true genius, not the discovery of new shapes, but the creation of a system where truth could be methodically and unquestionably established. Consider the Pythagorean theorem, a rule that builders had used for centuries to square the corners of their temples. They knew a triangle with sides of 3, 4, and 5 units created a perfect right angle, but they knew it as a useful fact, a reliable pattern. Euclid provided the irrefutable proof, showing why this relationship must be true for any right triangle, turning a craftsman's trick into a universal law of nature. This shift from intuition to proof changed everything. It allowed a thinker like Thales to calculate the height of the Great Pyramid without ever climbing it. By comparing the pyramid's shadow to the shadow cast by a small, vertical stick, he used the geometry of similar triangles to measure the immense, a direct application of the principles Euclid would later codify. Architects were no longer just following tradition, they were applying proven rules. The proportions of a facade, the slope of a roof, the stability of an arch, all could be planned and verified on a parchment before a single stone was laid. What does this relentless drive to formalize chaos into logic tell us? It reveals a profound shift in the human intellect. We were no longer content to simply use the patterns we found in nature. We sought to understand the very engine of reality, to uncover the immutable rules that govern space itself. This formal system became the silent backbone of civilization, the invisible scaffold upon which all future engineering and science would be built. But this powerful new language of lines and proofs did not remain confined to the scholar's study. It soon began to shape the stories a culture tells about itself, influencing art, philosophy, and the very image of the ideal world. A potter's wheel spins, guided by hands that understand balance without needing a single equation. This was geometry in its most humble and essential form, the silent partner in every workshop and every field. Artisans did not see themselves as mathematicians, yet their work was a testament to geometric principles. Jewelers used simple compasses to scribe perfect circles for pendants and bracelets. while weavers followed complex geometric patterns on their looms to create textiles with repeating borders and intricate motifs. In the Islamic world, this artistry reached its zenith with tessellations, where a single tile shape, like a star or a polygon, could be repeated without gaps to cover an entire wall or floor. These stunning patterns were more than decoration. They were a physical expression of infinity and unity, a visual proof that simple rules could generate boundless complexity. This same practical intelligence fed entire civilizations. After the annual Nile flood receded, Egyptian fields were left blank, their boundaries washed away. Surveyors, the Harpedonapti, would arrive with their knotted ropes. They used geometry to restore each farmer's plot with absolute fairness, preventing disputes and ensuring that the community's food supply was secure. This system, known as the Seat, was a method of calculating slopes and areas that was so vital it was taught to every scribe. Across the ocean, the Inca faced a different geographic challenge: steep mountain slopes. Their response was a masterpiece of agricultural engineering, terraces that carved the Andes into a giant staircase of fertile land. Each terrace wall was precisely angled to retain soil, and the layout of the entire system formed a vast geometric network that controlled water flow and prevented catastrophic erosion. According to the historian Fern and Braudel, this geometric efficiency in crafts and farming was not merely about survival, it was the very engine of the economy. A perfectly symmetrical pot was easier to trade, a fairly divided field produced a more reliable surplus, and a well-laid-out terrace system sustained a population for centuries. How did these daily practices foster resilience? They turned abstract knowledge into communal muscle memory. Every time a farmer divided a field or a potter centered a lump of clay, they were reinforcing a system of order and predictability that allowed their society to withstand shocks from famine to foreign invasion. This deep, ground-level familiarity with shape and space did more than build sturdy baskets or reliable harvests. It trained the human eye to see beauty in pattern and the human mind to find harmony in proportion. That cultivated sense of order was ready to be poured into the creation of objects meant not just for use, but for pure expression. Greek vases tell stories not only with their painted figures, but with the silent architecture of their design. A hero chases a foe across the curved surface of an amphora, their motion framed within precise bands and borders that guide your eye in a graceful dance. This was not arbitrary decoration. Artists employed an intuitive rule of thirds, dividing the surface to create focal points that felt naturally balanced and harmonious. They understood that composition relied on an invisible geometric grid, a scaffold of lines and ratios that gave even the most dynamic scenes a profound sense of order. The art historian Erwin Panofsky saw this as a symbolic language where geometric forms conveyed deep philosophical ideas. In the rigid, frontal poses of early Egyptian statues, the cube-like solidity represented eternity and unchanging truth. Centuries later, Hellenistic sculptors used spiraling compositions and dynamic triangles to capture a fleeting moment of struggle or ecstasy, infusing stone with the geometry of motion. This symbolic language reached its most intricate form in Celtic knotwork. Endless, interlacing bands with no beginning and no end were more than beautiful patterns. They were fractal-like diagrams of eternity, a visual metaphor for the infinite cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The ancient artists' reliance on mathematical rules is perhaps most clearly seen in the Egyptian canon of proportions. Before a single chisel struck stone, a grid of 18 equal squares from feet to hairline was drawn on the wall or block. The figure was then constructed within this strict framework, with every part of the body, from the knee to the eyebrow, occupying a predetermined square. This system ensured that every statue of a pharaoh, regardless of which artisan carved it, would embody the same perfect, idealized form, making the individual subject synonymous with an eternal, geometric order. But why bind creativity with such rigid rules? For the same reason, Byzantine artisans covered entire church domes in shimmering mosaics of gold. They used millions of tiny, colored tiles to create vast geometric tessellations of circles and crosses, transforming the curved vault of the apse into a vision of heaven itself. To stand beneath that dome was not merely to look at art, it was to be enveloped by a divine architecture, to feel the harmony of the cosmos made tangible. This demonstrated a universal conviction that true beauty was not a product of wild inspiration, but the visible expression of an underlying, logical perfection. The line between a beautiful pot and a perfect proof was far thinner than we might think. This artistic pursuit of ideal forms through geometry naturally bled into the realm of pure thought, where philosophers began to see the entire universe as a puzzle waiting to be solved by the right mathematical key. The inscription over Plato's academy was not an elitist dismissal, but a profound declaration of intent. Let no one ignorant of geometry enter here. This was the ultimate prerequisite for anyone seeking to understand truth, justice, or the nature of reality itself. For philosophers like Plato and his predecessor Pythagoras, the perfect, unchanging world of geometric forms was the only true reality. The messy, imperfect world we perceive with our senses was merely a shadowy copy. A triangle drawn in the sand is flawed and temporary, but the concept of triangularity with angles that always sum to 180 degrees is eternal and perfect. This was the gateway to higher knowledge. To study geometry was to train the mind to see beyond the illusion of the senses and apprehend this divine, permanent order. Pythagoras took this idea even further. He and his followers discovered that the very same mathematical ratios governing the length of a vibrating string, which produce harmonious musical notes, could also be found in the motions of the planets. They envisioned the cosmos as a vast celestial instrument, each planet moving in its orbit according to a specific harmonic interval, creating a cosmic symphony they called the music of the spheres. This was not a poetic metaphor, but a scientific and spiritual conviction that the universe was fundamentally mathematical, a blend of science and spirituality where beauty, truth, and morality were all expressions of the same geometric laws. This philosophical framing elevated geometry from a practical tool to an entire worldview. In his dialogue Timaeus, Plato describes the universe itself as being crafted by a divine craftsman from the 5 Platonic solids. The element of earth was composed of stable cubes, fire of sharp tetrahedrons, air of smooth octahedrons, and water of flowing icosahedrons. The dodecahedron was reserved for the shape of the cosmos as a whole. This was not mere speculation, it was a physical model of creation, linking the tangible world directly to abstract perfection. How did this influence daily life and ethical thought? Geometric proofs became the gold standard for all logical discourse. Just as you could prove beyond any doubt that the angles of a triangle must equal 2 right angles, philosophers sought to construct moral arguments with the same unshakable logic. The concept of virtue was not a vague ideal, but a state of balance and proportion within the human soul, a golden mean between extremes of behavior, much like the harmonious ratios in a beautiful building or a pleasing chord. This intellectual heritage provided the foundational confidence for the ancient world's most ambitious engineering projects. If the universe itself was built on geometric principles, then humanity, by mastering those same principles, could partake in that divine power of creation. A Roman aqueduct does not simply cross a valley, it defies gravity with a series of perfectly calculated arches. Each curve is a segment of a circle, a geometric form that channels the immense weight of stone and water downward and outward into sturdy piers. This principle, the true arch, was a revolution in engineering, allowing builders to create openings wider and stronger than any single stone slab could ever be. At the Pont du Gard in France, the stacked tiers of arches demonstrate a masterful understanding of load distribution, with each level bearing a different proportion of the structure's total weight. The result is a channel that carried millions of gallons of water across dozens of miles, maintaining a precise, gentle gradient from its source to the city. This slope, often as little as a few inches per mile, was a geometric calculation of breathtaking accuracy, ensuring the water flowed with just enough force to move, but not so much that it eroded the channel walls. How did they achieve such control over nature's raw power? The answer lies in the tools of the geometer, the same simple levels and sighting instruments that could translate a theoretical line on a map into a physical reality of stone and mortar. This engineering genius was not confined to Rome. In the Persian Empire, builders confronted a different challenge, a parched landscape. Their solution was the Qanat, a gently sloping underground tunnel dug back into a mountainside to tap a hidden aquifer. The geometry here was one of survival, the slope meticulously calculated to be just steep enough for the water to flow freely to the surface many miles away, yet shallow enough to prevent a collapse of the tunnel walls. These were not just water channels, they were linear oases, turning entire regions into fertile gardens through the silent, persistent application of a geometric rule. This same practical intelligence scaled to the monumental. To raise an Egyptian obelisk, a single piece of stone weighing hundreds of tons, required more than brute strength. It demanded the geometric principles of the lever and the pulley, systems whose mechanical advantage was mathematically understood. Archimedes famously declared that with a lever long enough and a fulcrum placed correctly, he could move the entire world. While hyperbolic, this statement captures the profound confidence that came from knowing the geometric laws of physics. Engineers used these principles to design massive ramps and counterweight systems, turning impossible tasks into coordinated, step-by-step operations. Even in warfare, geometry was the ultimate weapon. The Roman ballista was essentially a giant crossbow powered by twisted sinew ropes. Its accuracy depended on perfect symmetry and triangulation, the frame forming a set of triangles that directed all the explosive force forward in a straight line. The projectile followed a predictable parabolic arc, a curve that engineers learned to calculate for maximum range and impact. What unites an obelisk, a Qanat, and a siege engine? They are all physical manifestations of a problem solved through shape and angle. They reveal a world where the line between a mathematician's proof and an engineer's blueprint was virtually non-existent. This shared geometric language became the very medium of empire, a toolkit of techniques that traveled along trade routes and with conquering armies, adapting to new lands and new challenges, forever altering the landscape of human civilization. A silk merchant in Samarkand might have carried more than just rolls of fabric, his mind a living library of geometric patterns picked up from 1,000 miles of travel. The bustling trade routes of the ancient world, from the Silk Road to the monsoon-driven Indian Ocean networks, were not merely channels for spices and silk. They were the circulatory system for an entire intellectual ecosystem, carrying ideas about shape, number, and the stars from one civilization to another. Babylonian astronomical tables filled with precise geometric calculations found their way to Chinese court astronomers, who integrated them with their own celestial observations. Greek mathematical texts rescued from the ruins of Alexandria were translated into Arabic in Baghdad's House of Wisdom, where scholars like Al-Khwarizmi didn't just preserve them, they expanded upon them, developing algebra and refining spherical trigonometry. This was not a one-way street. The knowledge then flowed onward through Islamic Spain and into the budding universities of medieval Europe, rekindling a flame of learning that had been all but extinguished. Historian Joseph Needham meticulously documented this global relay race of ideas, showing how a geometric concept could begin its life in one culture, be refined in another, and achieve its most practical form in a third. Consider the journey of the Pythagorean theorem. Known to Babylonian surveyors centuries before Pythagoras, this principle for right-angled triangles traveled east to ancient India, where it appeared in the Sulbasutras, sacred texts that provided geometric rules for constructing elaborate altars. It was a practical necessity for ensuring the precise shapes required for ritual, proving that the same mathematical truth could serve both an engineer and a priest. This cross-pollination profoundly enriched architectural expression. The intricate geometric mosaics that adorn the Alhambra in Spain are a direct legacy of this exchange, their complex star and polygon patterns reflecting a synthesis of Greek theoretical geometry and decorative arts from Persia and beyond. These patterns, known as giri, were not just beautiful, they were intellectually sophisticated, a visual language of infinity that could cover any surface without beginning or end. Perhaps the most tangible symbol of this shared intellectual heritage is the astrolabe. Originally conceived in the Hellenistic world, it was a flat model of the celestial sphere. Islamic scientists perfected its design, adding intricate scales and reticles that made it an unparalleled tool for navigation, timekeeping, and prayer. From there, it spread across the known world, guiding sailors in the Indian Ocean and scholars in Oxford. How did this global conversation accelerate human progress? It meant that no civilization had to start from scratch. A builder in Cairo could benefit from a vaulting technique perfected in Rome, while a mapmaker in Constantinople could use coordinate systems developed in China. Geometry became a true universal language, a set of rules that transcended spoken tongues and local gods, allowing humanity to build a shared understanding of the physical world. This interconnected legacy of lines and proofs, however, leaves us with profound puzzles, geometric achievements from the past that still challenge our modern assumptions about what was possible. The Great Pyramid's northward gaze is so exact it defies simple explanation. Modern surveys confirm its sides align with the cardinal directions to within 1/15th of a degree, an error margin so small it rivals the precision of some contemporary instruments. How could a civilization without magnetic compasses or advanced optics achieve such perfection? The standard theory suggests they used circumpolar stars, tracking their arc across the night sky to establish a true north-south line. Yet the sheer consistency of this alignment across such a massive base, each side over 700 feet long, leaves room for wonder. It is as if the builders possessed a geodetic awareness, an understanding of the planet's orientation that seems almost innate. This geometric perfection is not an isolated case. Far to the south, the Nazca lines spread across the Peruvian desert, their straight pathways and colossal animal forms etched into the rocky soil. From the ground, they are bewildering trenches, but from the air, their true geometric nature is revealed. These are not random scratches. They are immense, scaled designs of a spider, a hummingbird, a monkey, their proportions held with a draftsman's accuracy over miles of terrain. The creators never saw their work from this vantage point, so what was their reference? How did they transfer a perfect, large-scale blueprint onto the landscape without the ability to fly? Some researchers, like Graham Hancock, point to these enigmas as potential evidence of a lost scientific tradition, a sophisticated knowledge that was later forgotten. Mainstream archaeology offers a different, yet equally fascinating, explanation rooted in painstaking effort. It is possible the Nazca people used simple grids and ropes, scaling up small models with a system of stakes and sight lines, a testament to what can be achieved through generations of meticulous observation. This debate between lost advanced technology and unimaginable human diligence lies at the heart of these mysteries. The intrigue deepens when we listen to the past. At the Mayan pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza, a hand clap at the base of the grand staircase produces a perfect chirping echo, the sound waves reflecting off the stepped limestone facade in a precise geometric pattern that mimics the call of the sacred Quetzal bird. This was not an acoustic accident. The pyramid's geometry was engineered to create this specific sonic phenomenon, turning the structure into a monumental musical instrument for ritual purposes. Across the Atlantic, the massive stones of Stonehenge frame the sunrise on the summer solstice with a precision that required not just observation, but prediction. To place those sarsen stones so they would capture the first light on the longest day of the year required a sophisticated understanding of celestial cycles and the geometric angles of the horizon. Perhaps the most startling artifact of all was recovered from an ancient shipwreck. The Antikythera mechanism, a complex clockwork of bronze gears discovered in the Aegean Sea, used precise geometric ratios to model the motions of the sun, moon, and planets. It could predict eclipses and track the timing of the Olympic Games. This was not mere stargazing, it was a mechanical computer, its logic built from interlocking circles and angles. Do these artifacts represent the pinnacle of a known technological curve, or are they fragments of a much greater, lost understanding? They challenge us to reconsider the narrative of linear progress, hinting at peaks of ancient innovation that we are only now beginning to measure. This profound legacy of geometric thought did not just build monuments, it would soon be called upon to structure the very fabric of human society. A Roman legionary, standing on a newly surveyed plot of land in a distant province, knew exactly where he stood. The land around him was a perfect grid of squares, each 140 acres, stretching to the horizon. This was centuriation, a geometric system for turning conquered wilderness into taxable, manageable, and loyal territory. The process was brutally efficient. Surveyors used a cross of two perpendicular sighting poles called a groma to lay out the cardinal axes, the decumanus and the cardo. From this central cross, they measured out the entire grid, assigning plots to retired soldiers who would farm the land and form a permanent Roman presence. This geometric order was the very mechanism of empire, transforming foreign soil into a mirror of Rome itself. The system was not just about land, it was about people. A geometric census was the foundation of Roman power. By dividing the population into countable units within a grid, the state could levy taxes, conscript soldiers, and administer justice with chilling efficiency. Your identity, your obligations, and your place in the world were defined by your coordinates within a vast, invisible geometric matrix. This concept of geometric equality, as noted by Aristotle, was a double-edged sword. It meant that citizens of the same class were treated the same under the law, a revolutionary idea of fairness. Yet that same logic also rigidly enforced social hierarchies, ensuring that those in the higher squares of the grid remained firmly above those in the lower ones. The geometry of governance created a stable, predictable society, but it was a stability built on a framework of control. Far to the east, a different civilization employed geometry for a similar purpose. The Chinese well-field system, or Jingtian, imagined the land as a giant tic-tac-toe board. 8 outer plots were farmed individually by families, while the central 9th plot was cultivated communally for the feudal lord. This was more than an agricultural layout. It was a geometric diagram of the entire social contract, physically embedding duty and hierarchy into the very soil. The Persian Empire, spanning from the Indus to the Nile, was divided into geometric provinces called satrapies. The boundaries were often drawn along natural features like rivers or mountain ranges, but the administration within them was strictly geometric. A network of royal roads connected the satrapal capitals in a system of straight lines and calculated distances, allowing messengers, tax collectors, and armies to move with predictable speed. This geometric organization made the ungovernable seem governable. It answered the fundamental question of any large state: how do you control what you cannot see? The answer was to impose a geometric abstraction over the messy reality of geography and human settlement. This framework made resources visible, populations legible, and power absolute. How did this shape the lives of ordinary people? For the farmer in his square plot or the traveler on a straight road, it meant a life circumscribed by lines and rules. Your freedom was perhaps limited, but your world was ordered. The chaos of nature and the unpredictability of human conflict were subdued by the relentless logic of the grid. This geometric imposition of order did not stop at the boundaries of the city or the field. The same human mind that sought to structure society longed to build a home for the gods, creating sacred spaces where geometry became a direct conduit to the divine. A heavy stone door swings shut behind you, sealing out the world of sun and sand. You stand in the hypostyle hall of an Egyptian temple, a forest of stone columns so massive they seem to hold up the sky. The air is cool and thick with silence. Your eyes adjust to the dim light, and you see the columns are not placed randomly. They form precise rows, creating a geometric pathway that pulls you deeper into the temple's heart. The floor slopes upward, the ceiling presses downward. You are not walking on flat ground. You are ascending through a calculated narrowing of space, a geometric funnel designed to compress your awareness and direct it toward the Holy of Holies. This was not merely architecture, it was a spiritual machine. Every line and angle was engineered to guide the worshipper on a symbolic journey from the outer world of chaos to the inner sanctum of divine order. The entire structure was a map of the cosmos, with the floor representing the earth, the ceiling the heavens, and the columns the pillars that hold them apart. To move through this space was to traverse the universe itself, your very footsteps a ritual enacted within a perfect geometric model. This impulse to build heaven on earth was a global phenomenon. In India, the construction of a Hindu temple began not with bricks but with a diagram. The Vastu Purusha mandala is a sacred square, subdivided into a grid of smaller squares, each one the domain of a specific deity. The temple was built directly over this cosmic blueprint, with the central square reserved for the main shrine, the symbolic axis of the world. The entire complex, from its enclosing walls to its towering spire, was a three-dimensional manifestation of this geometric code. The goal was to create a space where the cosmic forces were in perfect equilibrium, a place where a human could stand at the very center of creation. Similarly, the circular stone rings of the Druids were not just calendars. Their concentric rings and aligned avenues created a sacred container, a geometric boundary that separated the mundane from the magical, a place where the community could gather to align their lives with the cycles of the sun and moon. Theologian Mircea Eliade called these places Axis Mundi, the center of the world. He argued that by building a temple according to a divine geometric plan, a culture was literally recreating the moment of creation, establishing a fixed point of order in the chaos of existence. This is why the proportions had to be perfect. The architects of the Greek Parthenon employed the golden ratio, a specific mathematical relationship where the whole is to the larger part as the larger part is to the smaller. They believed this ratio, which appears in nature from seashells to flower petals, was the key to aesthetic perfection, a beauty so inherent it would be pleasing to the gods themselves. The facade of the Parthenon can be neatly inscribed within a golden rectangle, and its various elements relate to one another through this harmonious proportion. It was not just a building, it was a prayer built from marble and mathematics. This geometric language of faith continued into the Christian era. The classic basilica shape is not a random assortment of halls. It is a perfect cross. As you walk from the entrance toward the altar, you are tracing the vertical beam of the cross. When you glance into the transepts, the arms that extend to the left and right, you are completing the symbol. Your physical journey through the building is a reenactment of the story of salvation, a geometric pilgrimage. This symbolic use of geometry could also be dynamic and dramatic. At the Mayan pyramid of Kukulkan, which we heard whisper like a bird, the builders also engineered a spectacle of light and shadow. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, the setting sun casts a series of triangular shadows down the northern staircase. These interlocking shapes merge with stone serpent heads at the base to form the undulating body of a massive diamond-backed snake slithering down from the heavens to earth. This was geometry fused with mythology, a celestial event made tangible through flawless architectural alignment. Why pour centuries of labor into the angles of a wall or the curve of a dome? Because these sacred spaces were believed to be active conduits. They did not just represent the bridge between the human and the divine, they were the bridge. The precise geometry focused intention, amplified prayer, and allowed an entire community to participate in a reality greater than themselves. It was a way to touch the timeless using the tools of the temporal, to build a doorway to the infinite with the sure and certain lines of mathematics. This same human desire to navigate toward something greater, to find a path through the unknown, would soon apply the principles of geometry to a much vaster and more treacherous canvas, the trackless expanse of the open sea. A Phoenician ship captain did not see an empty ocean, but a geometric grid of celestial pathways. By measuring the angle between the horizon and the North Star with a simple wooden cross staff, he could calculate his latitude. This was the essence of celestial navigation, turning the dome of the sky into a measurable, spherical map. The Polynesians, voyaging across the vast Pacific, read the geometry of the ocean itself. They memorized the specific angles at which swells reflected off distant, unseen islands, and they tracked the flight paths of birds at particular times of day, creating mental triangulation charts that guided them to specks of land thousands of miles from home. Their canoes were tiny specks on an immense blue canvas, yet their geometric understanding of natural patterns made them the masters of this watery world. This empirical knowledge was eventually codified into the first true maps. The Greek geographer Ptolemy, working in Alexandria, proposed a system of drawing the spherical Earth onto a flat sheet. His work described a grid of latitude and longitude, imaginary lines forming a geometric web that could assign a unique coordinate to any location on the planet. Though his maps were lost to Europe for centuries, the geometric principle of a coordinated grid would become the foundation of all modern cartography. In the medieval period, this evolved into the Portolan chart, a stunningly precise map used by Mediterranean sailors. These were not pictures of land, but functional diagrams of geometric relationships. They were covered in a spiderweb of room lines, straight paths that radiated from central compass roses at specific angles. A navigator could simply draw a line from his origin to his destination and then sail at the constant compass bearing indicated by that line, a direct application of Euclidean geometry to the art of sailing. The tool that made this possible was the magnetic compass, a Chinese invention that incorporated profound geometric insight. The early compass was not just a needle pointing north. It was a square wooden plate with the circular dial of the compass set perfectly in its center. The plate itself was engraved with a pattern of concentric circles and radiating lines, dividing the 360 degrees of a circle into precise directional segments. This simple device fused the geometry of the circle with the physics of magnetism, giving every sailor a portable, reliable reference for the cardinal directions. Even in the fog-shrouded North Atlantic, the Norse found their way by geometry. They used a sun compass, a wooden disc with a central gnomon or shadow stick. By marking the tip of the gnomon's shadow at various times during a day of sailing, they could plot a line that revealed their east-west orientation. On days when the sun was hidden, they used a crystal known as a sunstone, which could polarize light to locate the sun's position even through dense cloud cover. This mastery of angles and shadows allowed them to traverse terrifyingly open waters and reach the coast of North America around the year 1000. How did these geometric techniques reduce the perils of exploration? They transformed a voyage from a leap of faith into a calculated journey. The unknown sea became a space that could be measured, charted, and conquered with lines, angles, and coordinates. This geometric conquest of space, however, was deeply intertwined with another great human challenge: the precise measurement of time itself. A sundial's shadow is more than a marker of hours. It is a line of geometry tracing the sun's arc across the sky. In the heart of Rome, the giant sundial of Augustus used a towering Egyptian obelisk as its gnomon, casting a shadow that fell across a vast marble pavement inscribed with a grid of lines and bronze lettering. This was not a simple timepiece. It was a public calendar and a political statement, its geometric shadow pinpointing the anniversary of the emperor's birth and marking the passing seasons for the entire city to see. The obelisk itself was a monumental application of the same principle the Egyptians had perfected for centuries, using these stone needles to slice the day into manageable, measured portions. Their lives were governed by the Nile's flood, and their geometric timekeeping allowed them to predict its arrival with uncanny accuracy, synchronizing their planting and harvesting with the cosmos. This need to bind the earthly to the celestial was a universal drive. Far across the Atlantic, the Maya carved their understanding of time into massive, intricate calendar stones. These were not mere decorations, they were complex geometric diagrams of cosmic cycles. The Maya used interlocking wheels of time, circles divided by spokes representing different calendar counts that meshed together like gears in a vast celestial engine. Expert Anthony Aveney explains that their long-count calendar employed a place-value system of dots and bars, a numerical geometry that allowed priests to calculate cycles spanning thousands of years, predicting eclipses and marking the conclusion of great historical epochs. Their time was not a straight line, but a series of nested geometric circles, forever repeating and renewing. This geometric precision in tracking the heavens found its most haunting expression in the stone circles of Northern Europe. The massive trilithons of Stonehenge form a horseshoe that opens directly toward the midsummer sunrise. The geometry of its layout, the specific angles between the stones, created a permanent astronomical observatory. On the solstice, the sun's rays would spear through the monument's heart, a moment of divine alignment engineered through generations of observation and stone moving. This was timekeeping on a monumental scale, where the architecture itself became the clock. Perhaps the most sophisticated fusion of geometry and time was lost for 2,000 years at the bottom of the sea. The Antikythera mechanism, with its complex trains of bronze gears, was a portable universe. Its gears, cut with precise tooth counts representing specific geometric ratios, modeled the irregular motions of the moon, the sun, and the planets. Turning its hand crank would have animated these celestial bodies in their orbits, predicting eclipses and tracking the dates of religious games. It was an ancient analog computer, its logic built entirely from the fixed, predictable relationships of circles and angles. Why was this precise, geometrically defined time so vital? For the farmer, it meant the difference between a bountiful harvest and starvation. For the priest, it was the power to commune with the gods at the appointed hour. For the ruler, it was the ultimate tool of social control, aligning the rhythms of thousands of citizens with the state's rituals and tax collection. Time, made visible through geometry, tamed the chaos of existence. It created a shared, predictable rhythm that held society together, turning the terrifying flux of nature into a measured, manageable dance. A labyrinth is more than a maze. It is a geometric metaphor for the soul's difficult path toward enlightenment. In Minoan Crete, walking the intricate, unicursal pattern of the labyrinth was a spiritual ordeal, a ritual journey to the center of one's being and back again. This was geometry infused with profound meaning, a shape that told a story without a single written word. Across cultures, simple forms became powerful symbols, a visual shorthand for complex cosmic ideas. The swastika, long before its tragic appropriation, was a sacred emblem in Hinduism and Buddhism, its arms spinning from a central point to represent the eternal cycle of creation, preservation, and destruction. It was the sun wheel, a geometric model of cosmic energy in perpetual motion. Anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss argued that the human mind naturally thinks in these structural pairs, and geometry gave these oppositions a visible form. The perfect, boundless circle often represented the divine, the celestial, and the infinite. The stable, earth-bound square symbolized the material world, order, and the four cardinal directions. The interplay between them, like a circle inscribed within a square, was a diagram of the spirit contained within matter, the heavenly manifesting in the earthly. This symbolic language was universal. The Celtic triskelion, with its three spiraling arms, captured the essence of perpetual motion and the triple rhythms of life, death, and rebirth. It was progress in a spiral, suggesting that moving forward often means circling back to deeper understanding. The Egyptian Ankh is a masterclass in symbolic geometry, a cross of matter surmounted by a circle of spirit, a fusion of forms that literally meant life and the promise of immortality. This was not mere decoration, it was a philosophical statement worn as an amulet. This encoding of knowledge reached its peak in the cryptic diagrams of alchemists. Their quest to turn lead into gold was a spiritual allegory, and their geometric codes were the map. The Ouroboros, a serpent eating its own tail to form a perfect circle, was the ultimate symbol of unity, the cyclical nature of all things, and the eternal return. These shapes were a secret language, protecting profound ideas from the uninitiated, while transmitting them to those who could decipher the geometric key. How did these symbols bind a culture together? When you saw the same spiral on a neighbor's shield, a local temple, and a chieftain's crown, it reinforced a shared identity and a common worldview. Your art, your religion, and your very place in society were reflected in these recurring patterns. They were a constant, visual reminder of the order underpinning the chaos of daily life. This deep-seated need to find meaning in form, to use geometry as a code for the cosmos, would soon be marshaled for a far more terrestrial and brutal purpose, the organized chaos of the battlefield. A phalanx on the march was a single, geometric entity, a rectangle of bronze and flesh that advanced with terrifying discipline. The Greek wedge formation was a human spearhead, a triangle designed to concentrate immense force on one point to shatter an enemy line. This was not a brawl, it was applied geometry on the battlefield, where the shape of your formation could determine victory or annihilation. Commanders like Alexander the Great understood that controlling space and angles was as crucial as the courage of their soldiers. They used the terrain itself as a geometric tool, deploying troops on high ground to create plunging angles of attack, or funneling enemies into narrow passes where their numerical advantage became a liability. The Chinese strategist Sun Tzu codified this thinking, emphasizing the critical importance of position, or shi, advising a commander to be like a rolling boulder, striking from a geometric advantage with overwhelming force. This tactical geometry was equally vital for survival. The Roman testudo, or tortoise formation, was a masterpiece of defensive geometry. Legionaries would interlock their rectangular shields to form a protective box, with those on the sides and front holding their shields outward while soldiers in the center raised theirs overhead, creating a nearly impenetrable shell against arrows and stone. It was a mobile fortress, its strength derived from the geometric principle of overlapping coverage, where each shield protected not only its holder but also the man beside him. The ultimate expression of military geometry, however, was the siege. At Alesia, Julius Caesar did not simply surround a Gallic hill fort. He ordered the construction of two massive, concentric walls of circumvallation, a set of geometric rings that sealed the enemy inside while also protecting his own army from a huge relief force outside. These were not simple piles of dirt. They were complex geometric fortifications with towers, trenches, and booby traps set at precise intervals, a calculated web of death that turned the landscape itself into a weapon. How did this geometric thinking enhance survival and innovation? It transformed the raw chaos of combat into a system of predictable, manageable risks. A soldier in a testudo or a legionary in a perfectly gridded camp knew his place and his role within a larger geometric design. This shared understanding bred cohesion and confidence, turning a collection of individuals into a single, efficient machine. The same geometric logic that organized armies and conquered territory would soon be applied to a far more subtle but equally powerful form of control: the flow of wealth and the structure of economic life. A merchant in ancient Lydia did not just inspect a coin for its shine, but for its perfect, consistent roundness. This seemingly simple geometric form was a revolution in trust. By standardizing the shape and weight of metal discs, kingdoms transformed commerce from a chaotic barter of goods into a reliable system of value. Each coin was a tiny, portable geometric proof, its uniform circle and stamped design a guarantee from the ruling authority that it contained a specific amount of precious metal. This geometric consistency was the bedrock of economic faith, allowing a trader from Greece to do business with a merchant in Persia without endless haggling over the purity of a silver lump. The Chinese independently developed their own geometric currency, casting coins with a square hole in the center. This hole was not merely for stringing them together, it allowed for precise verification. An official could pass a standard square rod through a stack of coins, instantly confirming they were all to specification. The circle represented the heavens, the square the earth, a tiny model of the cosmos that also happened to be an incredibly efficient economic tool. This geometric order extended far beyond the purse. Walk through the ruins of Ostia, the port of Rome, and you will see the geometric skeleton of a powerhouse economy. The warehouses or horia were laid out as perfect rectangles, their internal spaces divided by grids of pillars and walls into uniform storage units. This modular design was a logistical masterpiece. A dockworker could locate any shipment of grain, olive oil, or marble instantly within this geometric matrix. The layout maximized space and facilitated the easy movement of goods with ramps and wide, straight aisles, a direct physical application of geometry to the problem of supply and demand. The entire system was governed by standardized measures. The Babylonian shekel, a unit of weight, became a universal standard across Mesopotamia. Economic historian Carl Polanyi argued that this kind of geometric standardization was not a minor convenience. It was the essential precondition for the complex, long-distance trade networks that built the first empires. Without a shared geometric language for weight, volume, and length, large-scale commerce would have been mired in dispute and distrust. Perhaps the most elegant fusion of geometry and economics was the Inca quipu. This was not a written ledger, but a collection of knotted strings hanging from a central cord. The arrangement of the strings, their colors, the types of knots, and their positions created a complex geometric code. A quipu could record tax obligations, census data, and the contents of storehouses across the empire. The system was based on a decimal place value system, where the position of a knot on a string indicated its value, much like the digits in our number system. This three-dimensional, geometric accounting device allowed the Inca state to manage a vast economy without a single written word, turning abstract data into a tangible, tactile record of knots and chords. Why was this geometric consistency so crucial for stability? It systematically eliminated uncertainty. A farmer knew exactly how much grain constituted a tax unit. A merchant knew a Roman amphora held a standard volume of wine. This predictability reduced conflict, built trust between strangers, and allowed economic activities to scale from a local market to an intercontinental network. The geometric framework made the economy legible, manageable, and therefore expandable. This same logic of standardization and order, once applied to the flow of goods and money, would inevitably be called upon to structure the even more complex web of human relationships and laws. A judge in ancient Babylon did not merely consult a list of rules, but a towering stone stele inscribed with the Code of Hammurabi. Its laws were steeped in geometric thinking, a framework for fairness built on proportion and measurement. If a man caused another to lose an eye, the law demanded the offender lose his own eye. This was not simple brutality. It was the principle of geometric equivalence, a mathematical balance where the punishment precisely mirrored the harm. For lesser offenses, the code demanded compensation in kind, such as a specific volume of grain measured out for a damaged crop, turning abstract justice into a tangible, geometric quantity. This system aimed to replace the chaos of blood feuds with the predictable logic of balanced scales, embedding a sense of cosmic order into the very heart of civil society. This application of geometry to law was a global phenomenon. In ancient Greece, philosophers like Plato argued for a deeper form of geometric equality. He distinguished between two types of fairness: simple arithmetic equality that gives the same to everyone, and a more nuanced geometric equality that gives to individuals in proportion to their merit or their contribution to the state. This was the geometric mean applied to human virtue, a radical idea that sought to balance the social equation not with uniform sameness, but with calibrated justice. It was an attempt to build a state that mirrored the harmonious ratios found in nature, where every citizen had a place and a purpose defined by a grand societal geometry. On the ground, this philosophy was put into practice by the Roman agrimensors. These land surveyors were more than technicians, they were legal arbiters. Armed with their grommers, they would march into disputed territories to settle bitter conflicts over field boundaries. Their measurements, recorded on bronze maps, were considered legally incontestable. The straight lines they drew in the dirt had the power of a court verdict, transforming contested wilderness into defined property and preventing endless cycles of violence between neighbors. Their work was a physical manifestation of the legal axiom that good fences make good neighbors, and those fences were always geometric. Even the architecture of justice reflected this order. The circular seating of the Greek amphitheater was not just for acoustics, it was a geometric diagram of civic participation. Yet, within that circle, the specific wedges of seating were strictly allocated by social class and citizenship status, a visible map of the city's hierarchical structure. Your place in the geometric layout of the assembly literally reflected your place in the legal and social order. How did this mathematical framing foster community cohesion? It created a system that was, in theory, blind to passion and prejudice. A law based on measured compensation for a lost ox felt more impartial than a chieftain's arbitrary judgment. It built trust in the system itself, allowing strangers in a growing society to interact with a baseline of predictable outcomes. By embedding geometry into law, ancient leaders sought to balance the turbulent geometry of human interests with the perfect, unchanging order they believed governed the cosmos. This external framework of societal order, however, would soon turn inward as geometry became a guide for the ultimate personal journey, the cultivation of the human soul itself. A young student in Athens would spend hours not memorizing facts, but constructing a perfect equilateral triangle using only a compass and a straight edge. This was not a test of memory, but a trial of the mind itself. Each step in the geometric proof demanded absolute logical consistency, a process that trained the intellect in the same way physical exercise trains the body. Plato insisted that this rigorous practice was essential for anyone seeking to govern, because it cultivated a mind resistant to the seductive flaws of rhetoric and emotion. It built a fortress of reason within the individual. Across the world, a similar philosophy guided the hand of a Chinese calligrapher. Before a single character was brushed onto silk, the student learned to hold the brush at a precise angle and to move their arm in sweeping geometric arcs. The composition of each character was governed by an invisible grid of proportions, balancing empty space with inked form. This was not merely writing, it was a physical meditation on harmony and order, where the discipline of geometry shaped both the art and the artist's inner character. Educational systems globally recognized geometry as a cornerstone of personal cultivation. In the medieval European university, the quadrivium placed geometry as one of the 4 essential paths to wisdom, alongside arithmetic, music, and astronomy. A scholar could not truly understand the rhythms of music, which is built on mathematical ratios, or the movements of the planets, which follow geometric orbits, without first mastering the science of shape and space. This curriculum was designed to produce not specialists, but integrated human beings whose understanding of the world was both broad and deep. Why was this considered the pinnacle of a liberal education? Because geometry united the practical with the philosophical. It taught that truth was not something to be felt or believed, but something to be demonstrated through an unbreakable chain of logic. This pursuit of certainty fostered intellectual humility, as even the brightest student had to submit to the immutable laws of the proof. The ultimate goal of these exercises was self-knowledge. In Eastern traditions, the meticulous creation of a mandala from colored sand is a profound geometric ritual. The artist works from the center outward, constructing an intricate, symmetrical universe from a single point. The process requires immense patience and concentration, a form of active meditation that stills the mind and focuses awareness. Upon completion, the beautiful, transient diagram is deliberately destroyed, swept away to teach the lesson of impermanence. Here, geometry becomes a vehicle for transcending the self, using perfect forms to point toward a reality beyond form. The legacy of this educational philosophy is all around us, embedded in the very structure of modern thought. The logical frameworks that underpin our science, our legal systems, and our technologies are the direct descendants of that sand-tracing scholar's disciplined mind. The blueprint for a modern skyscraper and the code for a digital animation share a common ancestor in the geometry of the ancients. Our contemporary world is built upon this invisible framework, where the same principles of proportion and pattern that shaped the pyramids now dictate the design of your smartphone and the layout of your city. Architects like Le Corbusier did not hide this debt. He created an entire system of design called the modular, based on the proportions of the human body and the golden ratio, directly channeling the ideals of Vitruvius into 20th century concrete and steel. His buildings stand as a testament to the timelessness of this harmonic language. This legacy is not confined to static forms. Look at the mesmerizing complexity of a computer-generated forest in a blockbuster film. Its endless variety of trees and leaves is not drawn by hand, but generated by algorithms based on fractal geometry, the same repeating, self-similar patterns the ancients observed in ferns, snowflakes, and river deltas. They saw this as the fingerprint of the gods. We see it as a mathematical formula that can render a virtual world with stunning realism. Even the lens in your camera owes its clarity to a geometric breakthrough perfected 1,000 years ago. Islamic scholars like Ibn al-Haytham meticulously studied the behavior of light, laying the foundational rules of geometric optics that are essential for everything from eyeglasses to the Mars rover's cameras. Their precise understanding of how light travels in straight lines and reflects at predictable angles made modern imaging possible. Perhaps the most ubiquitous example is the global positioning system in your pocket. Every time you request a route, your phone performs instant calculations using spherical trigonometry, the very same branch of geometry that Greek astronomers like Ptolemy developed to map the stars onto a celestial sphere. Your location is pinpointed by triangulating signals from satellites, a direct descendant of the methods used to measure the Earth itself. How does this unbroken chain of knowledge demonstrate the power of geometric thought? It reveals a universal language that transcends time, a tool so adaptable that it can guide a stonecutter's hand and a computer's processor with equal authority. This deep continuity suggests that the ancient quest for cosmic order did not end. It simply found new expression in silicon and steel, offering a timeless toolkit for the challenges yet to come. A Kanat tunnel stretching for miles beneath the desert does more than carry water. It offers a blueprint for survival in a warming world. These ancient Persian marvels, with their gently sloping geometry, are being revived today in arid regions from Oman to Arizona to combat devastating water scarcity. They tap into deep aquifers and guide the water to the surface without a single watt of electricity, relying entirely on gravitational pull calculated with flawless precision. This is not a historical curiosity. It is a cutting-edge solution to a modern crisis, demonstrating that the most advanced design for our future may have been buried in the sand for thousands of years. The visionary Buckminster Fuller looked at these same geometric principles and saw the geodesic dome, a structure of interlocking triangles that encloses the maximum volume with the minimum surface area. This geometric efficiency translates directly into radical sustainability, requiring fewer materials and less energy for heating and cooling. Fuller called our planet Spaceship Earth, and he argued that we needed the geometric intelligence of a master engineer to manage its finite resources wisely. This ancient wisdom extends from the monumental to the intimately human. The golden ratio, which gave the Parthenon its timeless harmony, is now being studied by architects to design hospitals and schools. They are discovering that rooms and facades built with these proportions can measurably reduce stress and improve cognitive function in occupants. The chaotic geometry of a sprawling, impersonal concrete jungle can breed anxiety, but a city block designed with harmonic ratios and repeating natural patterns can feel instinctively calming and coherent. We see this same principle in action when we look back at the agricultural terraces of the Inca. Their mountainous farms were not just flat steppes, they were complex geometric networks that controlled erosion, managed microclimates, and retained soil nutrients with breathtaking efficiency. Modern regenerative farmers are now adopting similar polyculture patterns, planting in spirals and concentric circles instead of sterile monoculture rows. These ancient geometric layouts foster healthier soil and greater biodiversity, creating a resilient ecosystem that can withstand pests and drought far better than our industrial fields. Why does this geometric wisdom from the past feel so urgently relevant? Because the ancients viewed geometry not as a set of abstract rules, but as a language for achieving balance between humanity and the natural world. They understood that a well-proportioned building was more than beautiful, it was energetically thrifty. A fairly divided field was more than just, it was socially stable. A carefully aligned city was more than orderly, it was psychologically whole. Their solutions were inherently integrated, solving for multiple problems with a single, elegant geometric intervention. The lesson for our fractured modern world is profound. We have the tools to calculate with unimaginable speed, but we often lack the foundational wisdom to ask the right geometric questions. How do we distribute resources not just equally but equitably? How do we build environments that nourish the human spirit as well as they shelter the body? The answers are not locked in a supercomputer, but are written in the stones of forgotten water channels and the faded blueprints of temples that sought to mirror the cosmos. By embracing this deeper geometric intelligence, we are not retreating into the past. We are recovering a lost toolkit for building a more resilient, harmonious, and truly innovative future. Geometry was the silent engine of civilization, a universal language of lines and angles that gave humanity the power to impose order on chaos, beauty on emptiness, and meaning on the vast unknown. We have walked from the primal need to measure a field to the celestial ambition of mapping the stars, witnessing how this single discipline structured everything from a potter's wheel to a philosopher's soul. The ancient world reveals that geometry was never a mere academic exercise. It was the very framework for survival, innovation, and transcendence. It empowered societies to achieve the impossible, building aqueducts that defied gravity and raising pyramids that challenged time, all while weaving a sense of cosmic harmony into the fabric of daily life. Plato saw geometry as a path to truth because it trains the mind to see the perfect, eternal forms behind our flawed reality. This pursuit of underlying order is a thread that connects us directly to those ancient thinkers and builders. Look around you now, the screen you are watching this on, the room you are sitting in, the layout of your street, all are built upon geometric principles these cultures discovered and codified. Their legacy is not locked in museums, it is alive in the world we have constructed. Notice the repeating patterns in a leaf, the spiral of a seashell, the perfect symmetry of a snowflake. These are nature's own geometric proofs, reminding us that the language of shape is the native tongue of the universe itself. By learning to see these patterns, we inherit the ancient tool of problem solving, finding elegant solutions through proportion and balance. If this journey into the structural genius of the ancients has sparked your curiosity, there are many more historical mysteries waiting to be unraveled. Subscribe to continue exploring the lost knowledge that built our world, and we would love to hear from you. How do you see geometry influencing your own life in the design of your home, the technology you use, or the art that moves you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining this geometric odyssey. May it inspire you to see the hidden architecture in everything.